Alright, well, good morning. Today we're going to start working on two-point perspective. So let's dig right in. First thing you want to do, go ahead and use both sheets of paper in your sketchbook. That way you have a lot of room to work with on this, so make sure you turn to a new page. Please also make sure on the table of contents you put in two-point perspective basics. Now, first thing we want to do, we want to establish our horizon line. Alright, very similar to one-point perspective, and you'll probably hear me say that a bunch of times throughout this. Alright, so I've got my horizon line started. Now, with 2-point, you want to have, just like it says, you want to have two different places for your vanishing points to be. Now, I spread mine pretty far apart, so I'm going to put mine almost a thumb's width from each side of the piece of paper. Now, from here, what we want to do is we want to work with an asymmetrical design. Now, please make sure that you line your ruler up with the edge of the page so you can keep this straight. And I'm going to run a horizontal line or a vertical line there that is, as equal distance above it is below the horizon line. Now, at this point, it becomes very simple. We're going to play connect the dots, and we're going to start just like this. We're going to go from the left side to the bottom, from the bottom to the right side. Now, be very careful of that little valley that you'll have in your sketchbook. Make sure that the ruler stays straight, and then as you approach that valley, just let the pencil drop and then pick back up and move to the vanishing point. And last but not least, we'll grab this side as well. Now, just for a couple of housekeeping rules, I like to label this one A and B, so that way when I'm doing this demonstration I can say, alright, A side, B side, and that should kind of help us out a little bit. Now, hopefully what you're seeing like a really long box. Right? Half of it's being pulled in this direction, half of it's being pulled that way. Alright, now what we want to do is go ahead and decide how much length that we want each of these boxes to be. And since this is the kind of a basic introduction to 2-point, so we're not going to be like, it needs to be 4 inches from this and 3 inches from that. We're just going to arbitrarily pick a horizontal line, and then I'm going to go off of my center section here. Alright, making sure, because I don't want to be in the valley. Alright, I'm going to make sure that I'm nice and straight. Check my ruler up against the edge of the paper, and then draw another horizon line, or horizontal line like that. Okay, so if you can kind of use some imagination, alright, right now we're kind of making a box, alright, that looks like it's got a much taller side and then 2 shorter sides. Alright, this is A side of the box, so this is B side of the box. Now, what we want to go ahead and do is we want to add on to the A side, because it's very important. Now, this is pretty much done. I could just erase it and leave it, and it would be an immaculately awesome looking box. Alright, but don't want to stop. You don't want to just stop there. So I want to keep adding to, because this is going to lead into doing some more landscape, kind of cityscape drawings. So we want to go ahead and practice this, so when we get to that part, there's not a whole lot of questions. We can really get the schematics done and spend more time on details. Now, the next thing I want to do, I want to keep my baseline the same. I don't want to change this. I want to make sure that that is a solid surface, and then everything from there we're going to build upward. So I'm going to start with this line. Notice I'm breaking the original diamond box. Alright, now at this point, alright, we could do a couple things. One, we could just throw in an arbitrary second line and hope for the best, or we can go ahead and do the slant here. Alright, we go ahead and get that guided, alright, because this line here and this line here are roughly the same. Alright, so now what I want to do is throw in the smaller of the 2 lines. Alright, that gets you that section. And then the next part is where 2-point can get a little confusing. Alright, but if you remember what the front box did, how this one slanted upward and that slanted to the opposite side, then this back here won't be that big a deal. Alright, now you know that the taller line of this one was basically added 2, whereas the shorter side was not. So I need to do the same thing on this side over here. So the taller line is the one I'm going to manipulate, and then the shorter line I will not. So I'm going to come down to this section, and I'm going to line up my ruler with the opposite vanishing point. Alright, and then I'm going to make a line. Now, I can sit here and confuse myself all day long, and I can start here and go all the way to the vanishing point. But since I know that this center box is a solid, I'm going to start here, I'm going to work my way over, and then that right there is all I need. Alright, so if I look here in the bottom corner, if I turn my fingers out, notice I've made this small little triangle. Alright, at this point, I can take that and erase that out, and you know, it will be none the wiser. But for our purposes today, I'm going to leave it in because I may need it in a minute. But just know that every time you do this, you should have this additional looking triangle on the drawing. Now, I need to finish the top as well, so I'll go up to the top part of the line. Alright, I will make sure my ruler gets connected, check everything, then, alright, I'm going to draw until I hit that original box. Alright, because this box is a solid, these boxes are secondary to that, so they're gonna look like they're going behind. Now, you may look at the drawing and you're like, oh, there's so many lines there, what do I do? How can I fix this? Alright, well, first thing you want to do is grab your trusty eraser, alright, and then eliminate some of these lines. Notice I'm getting rid of this section, alright, lightly getting rid of those, and then I'm taking that line away. Alright, now I erased the horizontal line in that box, so let's go ahead and do it here. I mean, your graphite's going to stain the paper just slightly, so you're going to have that information whether you want it or not. Alright, so now I've got one box, a second box. Alright, now I'm going to quickly kind of jump ahead in time. I need to put in at least 3 more boxes. Alright, I'm going to put one back here. So I'm going to jump, go really quick. I'm going to say really quickly, but it's not really going as fast as I had hoped. Alright, so that's box 3. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now this is where it may get another slight confusion for you. But if you remember the basic rules, and that meaning start with the top line, alright, set the slanted side first, or the side that you're working on. Alright, so you see how I've already got that outside square, and then if I need to, I can come in and erase, say bye-bye to those lines. Alright, now here's where you don't want to get confused. Alright, remember this is the tallest line that we put in there. So I'm going to go to the vanishing point, make sure my ruler's lined up over here where my pinky's at, and then at the bottom of this line here, and I'm going to draw toward that center box. Alright, when I let go, see I made that nice little triangle there? Alright, then I will go to the top of that line, and I'll grab here, and I will connect that direction. Alright, and at that point I do have a couple more lines I need to get rid of. Sayonara, bye-bye. Alright, so now I got 1, 2, 3, 4, and just for fun purposes, let's go ahead and throw in a 5th box. Alright, this one I will use the diamond just to expedite the process. If you think you need a little extra practice, go ahead and build one taller or shorter than that original diamond. Okay, so that's part 1 of today's lesson. Alright, part 2 is talking about how do we build different types of value. Alright, so down here in the bottom right hand corner, I want you to put 5 techniques to shading. Alright, and go ahead and list them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, now the first one is a hatching technique. And when you do hatching is really simple. You know, you can go over here and put, you know, this, or you could put that, or you could put diagonal lines. Alright, but basically it's just parallel lines. Alright, now to see this, I'm going to start here in this big box, and I'm going to start, and I like to pattern my hatching lines. I don't like them to be all just like straight across. I like mine to have a lot more texture. Now I'm going to start out pretty wide with these. See how I'm not trying to get them super close. Alright, and the ways that we create value, one is through closeness, alright, or proximity. Two is layering. Three is pressure. And then four would just be changing your pencils. Alright, and that's why you have a package of 10 pencils, is so that you don't really have to sit there and keep pressing down or lighting up. Alright, you have several pencils that you can just grab and move to. So the one that we're going to work on right now is that closeness. So as I'm building these hatching lines, alright, here at the top where it should be lighter, I'm just going to keep fanning my hatching lines in different directions. But then as I start coming down the page, yeah, I may kind of increase the length of my hatching lines, but I'm also going to start laying in a little bit more pressure, but I'm going to start putting the lines much more closer together. Alright, because more graphite with a little bit more pressure, alright, go ahead and starts creating a darker value. So you can see how I've got this tonal shift. This is lighter. This starts to get a little medium because I added a little bit more pressure. But then when I start putting it all closer together, then that illusion of starting to get darker begins. All right. Now, for sake of demonstrations, keep this going. You want to make sure that this gets dark. So by the time you get to the bottom, you really want to be a lot of pressure, things really close together. Alright, you want to be pulling as much darkness out of that as possible. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to skip this front. Alright, and then I want to go ahead and work on these two smaller sides. Alright, so the second type of technique, alright, and you make sure that you go ahead and finish this box, because that is what you need to work on. Alright, but for sake of demonstrations, I'm going to move on to the next technique. So here, the second one is called cross hatching. Alright, so that's basically we're working in X's. Alright, so it could be lots of X's, alright, it could be plus signs, alright, but basically you're taking those parallel lines that you worked with hatching and crossing them over. So I'm going to use the short side here, and once again I'm going to make some patterns with mine, because straight up just cross hatching to me is an eyesore to look at. My lines just start crossing and then everything kind of just whittles out. So I like mine with some texture, with some change of action. But make sure that every one of them that you put down here has not only one set of parallels but a second set. Now I started at the bottom with this one, alright, just to kind of show you what we're going to do. So as we move up, go ahead and keep working on that idea of closeness, alright, or proximity. So as it comes up, even though, yeah, you're going to be putting lots of extra lines on there, go ahead and increase that space. Alright, so that is cross-hatching. Now, the next one is the one that I fear the most as a teacher, because everyone seems to want to do this one wrong. Alright, they just want to sit here and drop bombs. They want to just go bam, 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 and just tap. Alright, now, in that regard, and that is a way of doing it, alright, but it's really annoying, alright, to you, to your peers, but it's also, you have no control over that. All you're doing is just, dropping, and it really becomes really erratic. And you, instead of getting circles, which is what Scribbles is, you wind up getting these kind of check marks, because your pencil is hitting the surface and then rebounding. So you get these kind of ideas. So when doing this, you really want to start out just by simply floating the pencil Alright, but as you float, work in a small circle pattern. You can watch the motion of my pencil there. Alright, you want to start in that vein. Alright, now you want to look for, lots of open spaces. But then once you get that accomplished, alright, stippling becomes a lot more easy, I guess, as you start working in that motion and just back and forth. Because stippling is not just dots. Alright, it's actually supposed to be a series of dots. Alright, and a series should work, with the building, with the object. It shouldn't be just randomized drops of the pencil. Excuse me, randomized drops of the pencil. Alright, so as we push forward, you want to make sure that this gets gradually darker as it comes down the page. Alright, so as it gets gradually darker, you can increase the size of your stippling dots as well. So more and more as it comes down. Alright, and that way you get that change of value from light here at the top to dark at the bottom. So not only have I increased the closeness, I've also increased the size. Alright, so that lays in a nice field of lights and dark by just using a series of dots. Alright, now the last two are pretty simple. Alright, this was my favorite one. Actually, I wrote that wrong. Bad. That's what I get for trying to talk and write at the same time. So number 3 was stippling. 4 is scribbling. Alright, please go back and change that. Alright, so so we're talking about stippling here. So let's go ahead and label those, that way we know what we've done. So that one is stippling, S-T-I-P-P-L-I-N-G. Alright, and then scribbles is number 4. So I'm going to put 4 right here. Now, scribbles, like I said, is one of my favorite kinds of value mark making, because I love making heavy, frenzied stuff. And we're going to do several projects with this, especially as we get into color pencil, and probably even when we get to ink later on this semester. Alright, but see how easy that was, how quick that was. Alright, I was able to cover a large amount of surface really quickly. Now, just by not changing pressure, now I did go outside the lines there and I'll have to fix that, but you can see really quickly I was able to cover a large surface. Alright, so this kind of helps expedite my process. Where these 3 are really slow, alright, because of all the changing and moving and stuff like that, this over here was really quick. Alright, it also kind of fits my drawing style. I'm very loose and very chaotic when I sketch, so this really fits what I do. Now as I come down, again, I am working on adding a little bit more pressure. Alright, but I'm also going to get these scribbles, alright, simply by layering in, alright, and putting in a little bit heavier pressure and then closing up the scribble gap. Alright, I'm able to start creating value down the page. Alright, so that's the scribble. Alright, and notice too that we were using this layering effect. Alright, and we've talked about layering already in class, but I want to keep adding that to you. Alright, a lot of people as they're drawing, they just want it to be an absolute as soon as you do it. Alright, it's on there, that's perfect. Alright, but any kind of drawing, any kind of art is going to need lots of layering. Whether it's printing, whether it's ceramics, whether it's sculpture, you're really going to be working in layers for the most part. So I mean, there's got to be a process, there's got to be a first layer, second layer, third layer. So not that you have to get used to it, but basically you have to get used to it, because that's pretty much what we do. Alright, now the last one, I'm going to change, and instead of working the inside structures like before, I'm going to work the outside of this. Now this one is very simple. Alright, this is what we refer to as modeling. Alright, and then once again, you can use the key term layering as well. Alright, but since this is a flat surface, we're just going to follow the direction, alright, of the perspective, and that's why I wanted to be on this side of things. So I wanted to start out and very much mimic, alright, the perspective. I want to go with what the technique or what the object is giving me. So notice that my lines are slanting upward when I'm above the horizon line, and that they are slanting downward as they come down the page. Alright, now modeling does work with layering, so I'm going to go back to that, add some pressure, alright, layer over top of what I've been doing, come down the page like that. Alright, keep with that layering idea. Alright, keep with that proximity or closeness idea. So I'm going to darken up just like that. And I'm just going to keep doing that a couple of times. So eventually I go from a lighter color here at the top to a darker color here at the bottom. So this should be lighter, this should be darker. Okay, so that concludes our first jump into 2-point perspective with some 5 different shading techniques. So please finish this up. Make sure that all the inside of the boxes on this side as well as this interior is done. You have a nice layer value on all this, and then just one side here is finished. These will be the things that when I evaluate your sketchbook in a week or so, that I'll be looking for to make sure that you've not only attempted, but you have a good value range top to bottom on each of these 5 boxes. Alright, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in class and or send me a message through Google Classroom. Alright, enjoy and keep sketching.